Hi, everyone. Before the episode begins, I just want to remind you to follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Marlene the Plant Lady and YouTube, Everything Gardening with Marlene Simon. And remember, please, please, please rate and review on iTunes and Spotify. That just helps the podcast get noticed by more people, and then more people will become better gardeners. And that's what we all want. So enjoy the episode.
Look at that plant. I want you to know that everything was grown in my garden. Don't touch that plant!
Is it poisonous?
She'll become part of the plant.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Flower Power Garden Hour. I'm your host, Marlene, and this is your April to-do episode along with question and answer. And I'm also going to throw in and talk about asparagus. So Joe will be joining in a bit. Joe, say hi now.
Say hi, no.
Now. Did I
Hello.
say no?
I thought so, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm just so used to saying no to you.
What?
Nothing. We can edit that out.
No, well, that's normal.
Okay. All right, your April to-do list. All right. So, it's been unusual this year, to say the least, at least in zone 9. Remember, I'm coming from zone 9. So if you're in a different zone, one, check what zone you're in. You could go to USDA.gov and you can look up a map, see what zone you're at, because each zone you're going to have different, differences in the seasons. You may be covered in snow still right now, or you may be very warm already. But here, it's been cold. I mean, it's been rainy, but that's not the most unusual. To me, it's the amount of cold. I had frost on our car window just a few days ago, beginning of April, which is really unusual. And so, some people have told me that they planted their tomatoes already and that they're doing okay. They may be in, their backyard may be just a little warm sink. But ideally, I'm not planting until the end of April. So even though we're talking about what to do in April, I'm leaning towards the end of April when I'm expecting to see some night temperatures and soil temperatures really warm up. So I'll go through what you could plant this month and I'll say whether or not you should wait until the end. But pretty much I'm leaning towards the end for most of this. So obviously you could have started your tomatoes, your eggplant, your peppers, your squash, cucumbers, all inside by seed already. So if you've done that, you probably are starting to already move them out and harden them off, which means get them used to outside conditions, because you don't want to just take a plant that's growing warm inside and then just plant it in the ground. That's too much of a shock and transition. So usually if you have things in a pot, you want to move them outside up against the house. And I know in some locations where the temperature swings are quite large at night from inside to nighttime, you move them outside and then you bring them back inside. We don't need to do that here. I've never had to do that. If you do that, it's not bad practice. It's just our nighttime temperatures aren't going to swing as much as other locations. So usually when it's time to move them out, at least 2 weeks ahead of time, move them up against the house. You don't want them to get the full sun. Morning sun's okay. And up against the house, they're going to be warmer. So then you transition them and then you move them to the ground. But remember, when you're planting in tomatoes and peppers and eggplants, you really want night temperatures to be that equal or steady 50 degrees all at night. You want soil temperatures to be warm, close to that as well. You could plant and you may not even notice any effects of it, but they could be stunted. They may not be growing as well in the soil, and so the tops look okay and you're like, oh, they're fine, but they may be stunted and they may never recover from that. So that's the problem with planting when temperatures aren't warm. It's not necessarily, oh, the cold is going to freeze them out. It just, they may not grow as fast and may not develop a root system as healthy as if the temperature you put them in the ground and all of a sudden it's warm. So April 15th, April 18th, you could start planting your tomato plants in the ground, assuming we're going to have those 50-degree temperatures. Squash, you could put seed directly into the ground. Cucumbers, Swiss chard, which is almost year-round, you could plant. Okra, sweet potatoes, and you can start putting watermelon seeds directly in the ground. And Peppers, I still would hold off. Peppers really like it warm, and I would wait until May to plant. But if you do, that's, it's okay. And same with eggplant. Eggplant likes it a little bit warmer. So those are your veggies. And of course, pretty much any all season herbs, basil. Most of them are perennial plants. So now is the time to plant pretty much every single perennial plant, everything. You could still plant dahlia tubers. And if you could find some summer blooming bulbs, it's getting a little on the late side. I know my gladiolas are pushing up, but if you find them, you can still put them in the ground. Sunflower seeds, normally by March, things that have reseeded, like sunflowers, are already popping up. I've only seen a few pop up, so you could plant sunflower seeds in the ground and other annual seeds. Weeds, watch the weeds, and how to do that is usually you just get them before they go to seed, so you prevent any more seed from landing in the ground. Of course, mulching is going to help, and you want to mulch to prevent water loss, because even though it's cool now where we're at, man, those temperatures are going to go up. And remember, you could lose so much moisture from evapotranspiration out of the soil. Keep it in there. Prune your once flowering shrubs, and what I mean by that is your forsythias and your quince. And camellias, anything that blooms once early in the spring, late winter, prune now, because you don't want to prune in the fall. So just remember to do that and start watching for bugs. But the key here is don't freak out if you see them. It's been late for aphids because it's been cool and wet, but they're going to come out. Other bugs are going to come out. And remember, your hose is your best friend for controlling them and also being patient and then monitoring for any beneficials you see. So don't go freak out and say, oh my God, it's going to destroy my plants. If you do see snail and slug damage, iron phosphate, go at night, hunt them down. Diatomaceous earth, if you see, peel bugs, roly-polies in the ground. So just monitor. Don't freak out. It's going to happen. But usually, they dissipate. Beneficials will come and catch up to them. So really April, end of April, it's a very busy time in the garden. It's a good time in the garden because you get to plant things. Joe.
Mm-hmm.
Anything to add to that?
Do I have anything to add to it?
Yes.
In terms of my gardening?
Yes.
I mainly just cut crap down at this time of year by way of mowing.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man,
Yeah.
it's...
And if it's green, I mow it down.
Well... Not the green I tell you not to mow down.
You're not very specific, so I tend to mow that down too, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's happened before.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have fertilizing on the list because I'm not a big fertilizer. I get them all the nutrients from compost. But if you have things in pots, it is a good time to fertilize. If you have citrus, EB Stone makes a good all-purpose citrus fertilizer. So it's a big difference between things in pots and things in the ground because of just the nature of the soil. And so just do keep that in mind as well. It's also a good time to start transplanting your succulents when they're actively growing. It's a good time to, if you need to move shrubs around in the yard before it gets hot, now is a good time to transplant things around. You don't want to do it when it's really hot. So yeah, those are just a few things to do. So I'm going to, before we get to questions, I posted something on Facebook about asparagus, and people really like asparagus. And I think it can be a little confusing because it's sort of an outlier with a lot of vegetables because it is a perennial. So I'm going to go in on, start talking about that. So generally in the fall, in zone 9 is when you're at the nursery or you see online that you could buy dormant crowns, meaning the base of the plant and the tubers, basically. So there's no active growing parts, and that's when you plant it. If you find plants, which you almost never do, you could plant plants in spring as well, but normally they're shipped as, quote, bare root. And how you want to plant is you want to make sure that you dig in a soil that's not incredibly clay because, of course, it could just rot away. And so a raised bed is ideal, or a highly amended soil is ideal. It's not to say you can't plant in clay. I have some in clay soils and they're doing okay. It's just, of course, most plants, almost all plants do better in something with a little more loose soil. So raised bed, it's easier for you to dig. It's easier for the plants to grow in. So you're going to take the tubers or the crowns and you're going to dig down, and you basically want to bury the tops of that about 6 inches down. Now, it used to be like you did this big trench and then you slowly, fill it back up. And, I don't have time for that. So I just plant and go, and that's it. So you could put a little mound and drape the little tubers over it. That's fine as well. And then the key here is, because they're perennials, meaning they come back year after year, is the first year you really shouldn't harvest anything. If you want to harvest one spear, that's fine. But the idea is when you have foliage on a plant, that's what's doing the photosynthesis. That's what's taking the energy in for the plant. That's what's allowing the plant to grow bigger and bigger. So if you harvest all the growth from the first year, that's it. There's nothing for the plant to photosynthesize, and your plant's going to be spindly and eventually die. So what you want to do is that first year in spring, when you see the little spears come up, and the spears are the stems and the leaves, you just let them go. They'll come out, look like asparagus, and then the tops will open up, and they have very fern-like foliage. Let that grow all season long. It will turn brown in the fall, and then you cut it down. The second year in spring, you'll see more spears coming up. Here you could harvest maybe a few more. You could finally maybe do a quote, actually have a few for dinner. But the idea is then you allow it to grow, and it'll turn brown, and then you cut it down. Now, the third year, your plant should be bulky enough that you could get a good harvest. And you want to harvest any of the spears that are thicker than a pencil. So if they're all coming up and they're all super, super thick, keep harvesting, because over time, they're going to dwindle and dwindle. And then as soon as they get smaller than a sphere, just then let them go to foliage, and then the same thing, cut them down. They can get, after a while, they're going to get crowded. And then someone asked me, if you dig up old mature plants, you split them and then you replant elsewhere, do you need to let them go to seed, i.e., not harvest the first 1 to 2 years? No, but the first year, I definitely wouldn't do a full harvest. So, they're going to be bigger, most likely, than the crowns that you buy, but you're still splitting them. You're still making smaller plants. So they definitely, and they're still new plants. So you still shouldn't really harvest as much as you would, because you're still disturbing them and they still have to get reestablished. And with that takes more energy. So I would say definitely the first year, do treat them like new plants. And then, the second year, I still wouldn't harvest as much. So yeah, that's what they're doing when they sell you, crowns, is they're taking mature plants and they're dividing them and then they're sending them off to you. So it definitely sort of depends on how big your split is. But other than that, yeah, you're trying to get them reestablished. So maybe not dig them all up and split all of them at the same time. You may have some popping up in your yard because some will set seed, and those ones are perfectly fine to eat. I know in some parts of the country they grow wild, and that'd be great to just go out and harvest them. And I think someone else asked, when do we know to stop harvesting them? And I mentioned that, they'll get thinner and thinner as the season goes on. And that's when they'll tell you when you could stop harvesting, smaller than a pencil. I've got some purple ones. The purple ones, the foliage obviously goes to green. And yeah. So it's fun, and people are like, oh, well, I just don't have the patience. Well, I mean, if you like asparagus, just go ahead and plant it. And believe it or not, 2 years goes by really, really fast. I'm not saying you can't harvest any at all the second year, but it's just, good practice. So that's asparagus tips. And I see them like shaded in the Central Valley. They really do fine in full sun. That's it, Joe. Do you like it?
No.
Yeah, there's very few vegetables you actually like.
What are you talking about?
Except for broccoli. We talked about how you don't like beans, so I'm really not.
Well, like really stringy beans, I'm not a huge fan of. No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey.
What else?
So you're saying I grow stringy beans?
There were ones, the ones that you had on like that half cylinder trellis. right?
Yeah.
There were
those
some
are
purple ones.
the Japanese long beans.
Yeah, those are pretty stringy.
Yeah, that was just me from harvesting them too late. That's when you get stringy beans and they're tough as you just harvest them too
Okay,
late.
well, they were stringy.
Well, you could go out and harvest too, Joe.
Oh my God. What else do I not like vegetable wise?
Oh no. Hold on. We discussed this. Do you like
So a ton, I
carrots?
see.
Do you like carrots?
Yeah, carrots are fine.
Okay. Dang, I don't like carrots. I know you like broccoli.
I like broccoli.
You like cauliflower?
I like cauliflower.
There's something else I thought you didn't like.
Okay, so
Okay.
We're doing well here.
We're doing great.
Yeah.
We're doing great. Corn.
Not a huge fan of corn.
Okay, you don't like corn. Okra.
I'm not sure.
Okay. That's because I don't harvest okra because I don't like it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I know people are going to scream at me. I'm sure it's because I don't prep it right. Mm-hmm. It's such a pretty, it's anyways. That's all. It's a pretty plant.
Okay, good.
Okay, let's do
Good.
questions.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, you don't like asparagus that much, do you?
No, it's probably my favorite.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just, it's, you can only have so many vegetables, so many nights.
What do you mean?
It's like asparagus every single night when you start getting a harvest coming in,
Right.
But
Yeah.
it does store a bit. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
I had.
Oh, you don't like tomatoes?
No, I mean, I don't eat a ton of
Oh,
them.
you don't like eggplant?
Not eggplant fan.
Yeah. Okay. And you don't
Yeah.
really like tomatoes?
No, I'm fine with tomatoes.
Really? Since when?
I don't eat them like candy, but I eat tomatoes.
Yeah.
You know what I really like?
What?
Which we had a couple weeks ago when I went out to dinner with somebody from work.
What?
Shishito peppers.
Yeah.
Well, you were asking what I like
yeah.
or don't like.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I grow those every year.
I'm aware.
Okay.
And so,
All right.
I swear to God.
Cucumbers.
Yeah, I like cucumbers.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Keep going. Do you
No,
wanna-
I'm done.
You're
I'm
done?
I know this
Sure?
is riveting for people.
Okay. All right.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Are we on to questions?
We're on to questions.
Okay.
Okay.
I did find it interesting that you were saying you were espousing patience as a virtue for asparagus.
Yes.
And saying, it's not really that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Patience is
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you had the patience for asparagus,
Mhm.
then the great majority of the population probably has
Yes.
patience
Yes.
for asparagus.
I'm always amazed that I garden because I have no patience. And it is one hobby where you need patience.
It's odd.
It is very odd.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
My job is to keep you confused. And I think that one confuses
Well,
you.
I think it just gardening
Mhm.
sucks out the patience that you have for everything else.
Ah, good point.
Yes.
Yes. Because I have patience for nothing. Like this conversation right now. Come on, let's go.
All right. Can you tell us what kind of small trees will do well in full sun in Rockland, California? You told us at McKinley Garden Center, but I don't remember anything but the crabapple tree.
Okay.
This is from Sherry
Sure. Yes.
with 2 E's.
I'm surprised you didn't pronounce it cherry.
Why would I pronounce it cherry?
I don't know.
Oh.
Because to me, it looks cherry.
You think it's cherry?
No, I think it's sherry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. McKinley Garden Center is in Saginaw. Yeah, I gave a talk there about Mediterranean gardening. That's right. And I remember her asking. So small trees, meaning 15, 20 feet tall, full sun. There's not a lot. And, this is sort of zone 9 where it's really hot. And so some come to mind, of course, are the crepe myrtle. Crepe myrtle is your standard. You see it blooming late summer just because it's a good tree. Some of the older varieties were known to get powdery mildew, but you almost never see that anymore. And of course, they come in a wide range of colors. Lately, I've just been seeing them pollarded, meaning cut down like they do with the mulberries. Don't do that. Don't do that. You don't need to do that. Don't have your gardener do that. But crepe myrtles, they're just a great tree. There's another one called Chinese fringe tree as well. A slower growing one, evergreen, is the strawberry tree, Arbutus undo. And it's the one that's called strawberry tree because the fruits are these round, multicolored. And yes, they're edible. They're not great. It's a relative of manzanita. It is evergreen. Of course, the California native redbud tree, and some people are like, oh, I don't like that because it's messy. Yeah, the pods in the fall are messy, but it's absolutely beautiful in spring. It's a native, relatively fast growing, no pests. Generally, there are some caterpillars that do attack it, but it's fine. It bounces back. There desert willow as well. It's not really a willow. It's actually highly drought tolerant as well. Comes in a light pink color, darker pinks, and it's fairly fast growing. You see it as a multi-trunked shrub. So if you want a tree, make sure that you get one that is grown as a single trunked. And I'm going to throw out the maytan tree as well, even though I don't see too much of them here. Little afternoon shade might be ideal for it, but it gives the look of a weeping willow without being a problematic weeping willow. And then the Sephora secundifolia, which is apparently the Texas laurel, that's also very slow to grow. So, if you have trying to get shade, it's probably not the best one, but right now it's blooming and the flowers look like wisteria flowers, but they smell like grape Kool-Aid. Yeah, it's really good smelling. So, it's also it's in the legume family as well. So those are some of the smaller trees, full sun. There's a trident maple and Japanese maple that are small-ish, but they do not want full sun. They need to be in, especially Japanese maple needs to be in afternoon shade. Trident maple ideally also will not be hit by that west sun as well. So those are the small trees that I recommend for a full sun, hot area.
That was a pretty thorough answer.
Thank you.
My rhubarb plant looks like it's getting ready to bloom. Do I just leave it alone or should I cut it off? Why would you cut it off?
The flowers?
Oh, is that what they mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This is from Janet, by the way.
Yeah. So the reason is because you want to harvest rhubarb leaves. And the idea is once it goes to flower, start setting seed, it's going to take away energy. And energy is sugar in a plant generally. And then that could make your plant produce less leaves and less tasty leaves as well. I tried to kill my rhubarb plant because I realized I don't like rhubarb.
Oh, a vegetable you don't like?
Yeah, I don't like a lot of vegetables. I already told you I don't like carrots. I don't like broccoli. I'm sure I just never had it. I've had rhubarb pie, but I don't understand it because rhubarb pie, anything we have to add so much sugar, like quince, you have to add so much sugar to something. I'm like, is it really the plant we like, or is that just really the sugar that we're liking? I know people like, no, rhubarb's so good. And it's huge. I think I tried to dig it up. I dug it up in the fall and moved it to a different area, but I didn't dig up all the crowns, the roots, so it's coming back. So rhubarb's a little bit like asparagus. It's a perennial. It'll die down in the winter and come back, and you could harvest the leaves. And used to be, oh my gosh, don't eat the leaf, only eat the leaf middle portion. Don't eat the blade of the leaf because it's super poisonous. Well, it just has a lot of oxalic acid, so you don't want to eat that, too much of that. So it's, and you want to harvest when they're red. But yeah, like I said, go ahead and cut the bloom off. So that's it.
Do people grow rhubarb to eat it, or is it?
Oh yeah,
They do.
Eat it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It's very bitter, not bitter, sour, and then you add sugar, and it's sort of like less
Got it.
sour.
Okay. I planted red clover in the asparagus bed before I planted the asparagus, thinking I could turn it over for nitrogen. There's still snow this year, but last year it looked like as if the clover was too thick. Could I just put it back in the ground, or should I dig it out, including the roots? This is from Luna. Do you have any idea where she's at?
No. This year has been strange with snow.
Yeah, I mean, because snow's low, so she could still
low.
be California and just not that, exceptionally high.
Yeah, she could still be only 3,000 feet or a little higher than that. What's Pollock Pines?
Yeah, but it's not staying on the ground there.
Okay. So red clover, it is a nitrogen fixer, meaning you plant it to get nitrogen, but it's a cool season one, like a lot of them are. So you plant it. And she's planted it before she planted the asparagus. But last year it looked as if the clover was too thick. So I'm assuming she let it go to seed and it's coming back. Should I just cut it to the ground or should I dig it out with the roots? Now, asparagus doesn't want competition while it's growing. So if you have like perennial weeds like Bermuda grass or bindweed or even other grassy weeds, it's not going to be happy. So ideally you want to have really anything growing in with your asparagus, but clover, since it dies down, there's no need to dig out the roots because you might be disturbing the asparagus. So I would just cut it back to the ground and just don't let it go to seed because then that's generally, when you have nitrogen fixers and by the time they go to fruit seed, you've lost the benefits of the nitrogen. So cut it down at peak flower if you can and just let it die down that way. You don't even need to turn it under necessarily. Like I said, you don't want to disturb those asparagus roots. So just cut it down and let it die down to the ground. But I wouldn't dig it out because I wouldn't want to disturb the asparagus at all. And if you cut it down when it's in flower, you're going to get all the benefits of the nitrogen fixation. But if it's gone to seed, then it's still, a green manure. It just is, you're sort of at a net gain, zero net gain, basically.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I guess the confusing part for people is when, they let a nitrogen fixer go like fava beans to fruit. Mm-hmm. And then you cut it down. You're still adding nitrogen back into the ground, but because it used a lot of nitrogen instead of making its own, you're not getting the added benefits of more nitrogen. But definitely cut the green down because that's putting back in the nitrogen somewhat that it used. Obviously not all of it.
Right. And it's got to take a lot longer to get back into the ground at that point, right?
Yes. And it uses nitrogen. Microorganisms use nitrogen to break down green material. So sometimes then you have a little sort of a loss of nitrogen even, but then you recoup it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm thinking it through.
I know. I saw that look on your face.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think as quick as you.
I know. I'm sorry.
I think deeper. It's complicated.
It's complicated for me to think too.
I'm aware. So would it be similar to doing just a nitrogen fertilizer where you just lay it on top of the soil?
Most nitrogen fertilizers are already broken down much further than a green manure. So it's going to be quicker.
Quicker.
Yes, quicker.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
But yeah, like compost, even though it's broken down, it still is requiring microorganisms to break it down even more.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I started several cherry tomato, I know you hate them, plants, and I'm wondering about potting them up.
I hate cherry tomato plants.
Kidding. Okay, so now there's a number of questions. I'm going to go through them one at a time.
Okay.
1, can I pot them? Can I up pot them to a 1-gallon pot, or is it too soon?
Should
I'm going to go to no, there's a lot.
Okay.
I think you need to hear them all.
Okay.
So that's the first one, all right?
Okay.
So do I upsize? If I do up pot, is that a term, or is that like she's just using that term?
Yeah.
That's a term. That's like a thing.
Pot up, up pot. It's fine.
Interesting.
Usually it's pot up.
Huh. Okay. If I up pot the large ones, should I put newspaper inside, then potting soil, then the tomato plant? I believe I read something about this in my email from Sacramento Digs Gardening. 3, once up potted, can I put them outside? Maybe on top of the raised bed in which it will eventually reside. And then finally, if I put them outside, should I put a frost cloth over them? I have hoops over each bed, so it'd be easy to do. It's from Tanya.
Okay, so I sort of hit upon
Tanya with a J.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. I sort of talked about this when I was talking about the veggies and how, if you're growing them by seed, you want to harden them off. So, first of all, okay, so can I up pot them to a 1 gallon? That really depends on what they're at. So if you started them in here's the thing. You could start pretty much tomato seeds in any size container. Most people, you could start them in like a 6-pack, or you could start them in those, cell trays where they're pretty small.
Hold on.
What?
What do you mean? What? What do you mean cell tray?
When they have just very small, like, I don't know how to explain it. You've seen them where they're just the size of a
I know
flat.
what you're talking about.
Okay.
All right.
And I'm assuming.
Do you realize you're
people
not actually describing to me?
Okay. I'm assuming if you know, then someone listening to a gardening
I know,
podcast is going
because I
to know
know-
even more than you, of course. As a cell, you get a 6-cell pack.
You realize that
Or
I've
you
probably
get-
assimilated a little bit more about gardening than you think
Yeah.
over the million
I've
years.
assimilated nothing about cars.
Anything that I do, I know. I'm aware.
No. Well, I can't help what you do is boring to me. Anyway, so cell packs. And generally those they have little planting openings. And you could get them that are 64, 72, 6.
I'm not aware how common these are. Like
Very
I know
common.
they're common in your world,
Yes.
but I haven't like seen them
Yes.
out in the
Mhm.
normal gardening
Okay.
world.
And so if you started in, say, let's just say a 6-pack, you go and you buy pansies and that size. If you started seeds in there, there's no need to actually up pot those if your timing's right and they're ready to go when temperatures in the ground are ready to go. Now you need to up pot when you're growing something, it's outgrowing the container it's in, but you can't move it to the ground yet because temperatures or you're not ready to plant it yet. So then you need to move it to a larger pot. Generally, you go from a small cell to a 4-inch pot. And that is usually standard practice. Now, I would not move a tomato up into a gallon pot at all. Just because if you have it in a gallon pot, it's most likely it's not going to have time to fill out those roots in that pot before it's time to go into the ground. And you don't want to. You don't want it to get adjusted to the huge size and then move it to the ground. The reason why you see tomato sold as a gallon at nurseries is they could charge a lot more for it. There's no benefits. In fact, it's more detrimental because you have a bigger root system having to get adapted to a new soil condition. So I would say the only time you up pot is if it's ran out of space and it's not time to plant yet, or you're going from a small cell pack going to a 4-inch pot. And that is it. And so, check your soil temperatures. If it can last long in a pot before up potting it, then you're good to go. Now, hardening off, I mentioned before, if you're in a, zone 9 where temperatures aren't going super freezing, that literally aren't freezing, you could leave it out overnight up against the house, a little protected. I wouldn't move them on top of the raised bed in which you're going to plant just because that's exposed too much to the sun at first and too much to the cold, the open cold. You could put a frost blanket over them, but I still won't even do that. I'll move them up close to the house. Oh, and then there was the up pot about newspaper inside. I think the newspaper inside was mainly for just blocking the holes of a big pot, because when you have a gallon pot or anything larger, those holes are bigger and the soil could just wash right out. That's the only thing I'm thinking about putting newspaper, paper towels, the same thing is you just have those openings and the soil's just going to come right out. That's the only thing I could think of. Other than that, I don't know why you put newspaper inside. So there's not one way of doing any of this. It's just those are sort of the standard practices. Move them up when they're really outgrowing the size, get them adjusted to that size, then move them to the ground. But look at the temperatures. When can you plant? There's no need to up pot something bigger and bigger and bigger if it could go into the ground. So definitely a gallon is too big from a cell to 1 gallon. Like I would never put a tomato I'm growing in a gallon pot. Would I start a seed in a 1 gallon pot early on? That's more likely what I would do. And to be honest, I would start everything in, if you have space, to start everything in 4-inch pots. So I would never have to move them up at all And if you plant 2 seeds in there, you could snip one or divide them while you're planting. But I'm lazy, so I don't like to move things from one size to the next if I don't need to. So, just start them directly in a 4-inch pot, and you don't have to really up pot them at all if you time it right. There you go.
All right. That makes sense.
Good, Joe. I'm glad that made sense for you.
Still not sure about the cells, but
Okay. We'll work on that. Everyone else got it. They're telling me in my ear, they're like, we get it.
those are just the voices in your head.
Oh, dang it. Oh, okay. I think I covered everything. Of course, if I left something out of gardening to do, of course, there's obviously, your garden is different. Everyone knows their garden. So there may be different things you're doing in your garden as well, but those are the general ones in Zone 9. So remember, of course, if you like this, rate and review it. Follow me on all my social media, Marlene the Plant Lady, at Facebook and Instagram. And until next time, everyone, happy gardening.